Well, I was in awe of Sadequain. And the first time I met him was it was at an exhibition that he'd given in Karachi when he came back from Paris with the Paris Laureate for his painting, The Last Supper. It was a very fantastic painting. Before that, I think nobody had bothered so much, but after that, became, everyone wanted to meet him. And he sort of rather looked down on all this. He couldn't bear all this fuss, He said, I'm still the same person. But up till that time, the formula for an exhibition had been that you invite a chief guest who comes about an hour late earliest. And they will say a few words and they cut a ribbon with a lot of bulbs going off, and that's it. But when Sadequain had his exhibition, there was no guest. We all strolled in with Sadequain. There was discreet music. He went around with his cigarette and spoke to everybody. We were all equals to him, and that impressed me tremendously. We cut out all that red tape, and he was really an impression. There's one thing about about Sadequain as an artist, that as far as I remember, all the artists looked up to him and they all admired him. He was like a folk hero. As he went his own way, he didn't try to please anybody. He asked for no favours. I mean, awards came, but he didn't care about them. He didn't look for them, and he didn't sort of lobby for them. He was a man on his own.
All right, tell me, how significant is his work in terms of 20th century fine arts and then calligraphy?
Yeah. Well, I think that I was very privileged to see the retrospective of his work that was held at the Maharta Palace some years ago, and one could scan his work from 54 until 87 when he died, and it totally covered what he was doing, and you saw the intense years, the messages he had, social issues he raised, and how in the end, all passion spent, he went into calligraphy and he started the movement. I mean, he influenced so many artists. But I think as an artist of 20th century, he was really up there with anyone because he was himself. He was expressing something that was very relevant to Pakistan with his Cobweb series and his, the paintings he made for people. He wanted people to see his work. He was a man of the people. What he did, I think, was very significant. And he was in his work, you see. One knew him because he was always there. You got to see this gaunt figure with a very ironic smile and very extraordinary large hands. So you knew him through his work. He was always there in his work.
नीचे दिए गए लिंक को क्लिक करें और स्क्रिप्ट वाला के YouTube चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करना मत भूलें.
You see, the story is that, as you probably know, that this came to him from, I think it was Ghadani, when he was there and he looked out and you saw this cacti and it took on the shape of cities, towns, and it meant much to him, and from then on he went, on that thread. But to me, looking at his earlier work, it was more like there was sort of Kufic script, because those lines were there earlier, before Ghadani. So, it's hard to work out, really.
All right. There are things like this mural, and then there are the Mangla Dam. And how do you see his effort to actually create such monumental works all alone? We don't have such tradition in our history, right? There was this one guy who created all of it. This slim, skinny guy. He was doing things. And for what? I mean, this grand thing that he wanted to create, can you make sense of it?
Well, he also did it in Lahore, in the library. Well, I mean, looking at this ceiling, I mean, I think he just wanted, he wanted to have huge paintings for the public where people could see them, in places people could go and see them. And then I think he had this extraordinary urge to paint on a huge scale, which I think a lot of artists have, but they've never tackled it this way. I mean, Nagori always wanted to paint large murals, but for economic reasons he painted very small paintings, but he was taught as a muralist. And I think with Sadequain, it was just his feelings were so extraordinary. And he wanted to do this very big, this very large thing like the dam. I haven't been to see the dam, but I believe it's absolutely marvellous. You know, it's just something he visualised and worked on it. I mean, that was his goal. There was no time factor. He just worked.
नीचे दिए गए लिंक को क्लिक करें और स्क्रिप्ट वाला के YouTube चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करना मत भूलें।
Right.
Do you think Sadequain's work actually constitutes one major component of the grand identity of Pakistan?
Oh, I certainly do. I mean, for the importance he gave to the, you know, so the original sort of art form, which calligraphy, and how he turned it into calligraph art and influenced so many people. That's, I think nowhere else in the world has that been done. So I think as an identity, he's very much there. But he was also very much a man of his time. He was very aware of roots, of history, of Islamic identity and Islamic art. And he sort of put it into his work very often. But I think he was also a man of his time. He was, you know, he saw social issues and he painted against them. And I remember Ahmed Pervez was quite angry with him for the cobwebs. You know, it went on. It was all great fun. So I think that the identity feature now, I think in every country it's there, because things are not as clear as they were. And I think, you know, a lot of youth in many countries have a bit of an identity problem. But I certainly think if one is looking for an identity, then certainly one would have to look towards Sadequain, because he brought history into his work and he brought it into the present time.
All right. Do you, this is my last question, do you remember any, you know, funny, entertaining interaction you had with him, you know, something that actually makes people smile and remember him for all his wit and humor and, you know, the expressions he used?
Well, there were many little stories. There were many little stories. I mean, he could be very naughty and he could be very charming. And I met him when he was working in Lahore, and I had my young nephew with him. And Sadequain was absolutely marvellous, shook hands with the boy. Absolutely, the boy was stunned. He said, I'll never wash my hand again, you know. He could be really nice, but he gauged the occasion. And if he thought somebody was trying to get something out of him, or he would be very naughty. Like this time when Bashir asked him about the gallery. And, you know, he turned up hours late at somebody's house. It was raining. He put his wet feet on a white sofa, sat there. And when Bashir mentioned the gallery, he said, you want to sell paintings? Like soap? That was the end of that. You know, that was my experience of him. But there are many stories. My only regret, if I may say, is that we do not have a national gallery with a permanent collection of his work. You know, and I don't think this is a job for the government to do. They have enough problems. This should come from the private sector. And I think there are many people who could get together and, you know, give us a gallery, and with professional people looking after it. Otherwise, everything's lost. So at the moment, what we try to do, people like me are trying to document through books, but it's not the same.
All right,
okay.
cool.
Okay. Well, Sam, thank you very much. Oh, I haven't discussed it with anyone, but to me, this looks like Sadequain's life. I think he's expressing, you see, unfortunately, he didn't finish this painting, and it's not all, you know, complete. Some pieces are missing. But to me, he was describing his life. He was talking about his maybe childhood, reading the books. These people to me look like mythical prophets. We have the calligraphy, we have the cacti, and we go around here, we see his hands, the way these darts are actually his fingers. And in his work, he was really throwing darts at all the problems. And this, to me, has always seemed Sadequain's hands pointing at the problems. And then we come across his beautiful lines, could be cacti, could be calligraphy. We come across his travels, the globe. He went to Russia, Romania, he went to India, he went to the States, he showed his work, he went to France, they loved him. And here are some of the friends he met, perhaps, characters from his paintings, people whose portraits he did. There again, here are the people who fight for justice, the prophets, the warriors. And here we have the stars, the unknown, the universe. I mean, to me, it is Sadequain's life. And I've never discussed it with anyone, so I could be wrong. But, you know, looking at each part, I can see something of his life, and maybe this was his autobiography.